We're going to continue this conversation right now. To join us, talk about the implications for big tech and what companies could be next on that list. Ed Lee is here, New York Times corporate media reporter, and Joanne Lipman, journalist and the author of That's What She Said. They're both CNBC contributors, and we're thrilled to have them here. Joanne, just when you have state AGs do this, in addition, obviously, with the DOJ now looking at them, politically, do they come together, do you think? Are they looking for a quick settlement? Is this going to be a 5-year Microsoft-style process? How do you sort of look at the permutations of it all?
I don't think this will be quick, but think about this. There are something like 15 different federal and state investigations if you're looking at Facebook and Google. It's going to play out over time, but regardless of how it plays out, whether they get broken up, which is what some people would like them to be, or whether or not, what we're going to see is a transformation of the digital landscape. We will see changes. And
what do those changes look like, Ed?
Well,
so
real look at what happened
here?
with Microsoft when they went after Microsoft, right? So after Microsoft, Google and Facebook, basically came alive. It created an environment where these new competitors came into play. So I think the changes ultimately will mean, there's a chance for new competitors to come into play. Whether it means things like selling things off or breaking parts off of the business, I think it's going to be a harder thing to execute. But I think it's just going to be that much harder for them to operate.
What about I don't know if you want to call it a novel idea, but the idea of looking at antitrust through a different prism, which is the way apparently the AG in Texas wants to, which is rather than look specifically at the damage to the consumer or to look at prices, which historically is what's been required actually by law, that there's actually a different approach. And will that actually, from a legal perspective, even work?
Yeah, I think that we are looking at an entirely new way of approaching antitrust. And I think what we're looking at is we've had the past 15 years of pretty much zero oversight. And now what's happened is federal and state regulators have woken up, legislators have woken up and saying, oh, my God, look what's happened. These companies have gotten so large. So, there is some of the traditional antitrust kind of concerns there. I mean, if you look at the advertising industry, Facebook and Google control 60% of all digital advertising. You add in Amazon, it's 70% of all digital advertising.
Can I just make the one point? As a son of an antitrust litigator, because we used to have these conversations about antitrust at dinner all the time, it's not illegal technically to be a monopoly. I think there's a misimpression in America that monopolies, they may be bad, but it's not necessarily illegal. It's only illegal if you either got your monopoly or kept your monopoly by doing things that were illegal. And so you have to actually demonstrate that.
But this is the Bork interpretation, right? That companies have been using in terms of how to operate for the past 20, 30, 40 years. There is a new interpretation where, it's competition. If you're harming competition, not just through price or through consumers, or you're using your monopoly to prevent others from coming to the fore. If Amazon is hurting a lot of other potential vendors just by their sheer size and their practices, that's another way to look at antitrust that goes beyond the Bork interpretation. And that's what these guys, I think,
do you think this is changing behavior in Silicon Valley? And I ask that just because Facebook has been under so much pressure, and yet they picked this time to roll out Libra. I mean, to me, that was kind of almost a tone deafness in saying, OK, we're just going to rush forward with this. Now, obviously, a lot of that stuff was set in motion long in advance. But are Silicon Valley players changing their behavior? Do they need to in the face of this new regulation?
That's a great question, because they haven't changed their behavior yet. Not just Libra, but talk about bad timing. Friday, I think it was, Facebook announced its new dating app. Right? So here they are. They're going to be collecting even more personal, intimate data. And not only that, they will be essentially taking on the Tinders of the world, trying to put.
I mean, I get it. They're still operating their business as they have been to this point, but do they need to change?
I do think that they need to change. And I actually think, if nothing else, we will see more self-regulation, because they're going to have to do that defensively. So, for example, one of the things, there's several bills right now in Congress. There's also Gavin Newsom in California. They're trying to change the way that we look at data. Right now, Facebook, Google, they own all of that data. There's this move toward data ownership, that we, the users, should have some sort of ownership of our data, that we should perhaps be compensated when they use our data. There are a variety of ways.
Exclusive permission, as in the case of the GDPR.
Before we let you go, real quick, because we were talking about WeWork in the last segment, and I wanted to get both your quick thoughts on what do you think is going to happen here, or what should happen?
Well, my issue with WeWork, frankly, is When the IPO came out,
Right.
we saw that there were 0 women on the board. And I know this is like slightly aside from what you're talking about, but I got to tell you, out of 100 IPOs this year, 40% have had 0 women on their boards. We're looking
And then they
at,
added somebody.
They added
right?
Frances Frei from Harvard, who is
Right.
the same Harvard professor who Uber briefly hired after it ran into all of its gender issues. So it's a little bit of kind of wallpapering over a major problem.
And in line with that, I mean, maybe to try and answer your question, maybe they need to hold off their IPO.
Right.
I think that's really, if they keep devaluing it, they're just signaling to the marketplace, we're not worth quite as much as people thought. So let's hold off. I think that's a way to sort of revise the board maybe and rethink their larger model.